Good afternoon, everybody. Good almost afternoon. We have a couple of minutes here. We're just gonna let the waiting room populate, let everybody come on in, get our meeting started.
If anybody, I'm adding into the chat, like Jeff, add your LinkedIn page, your information, where you're from.
Yeah.
Let's interact until we, start. We're gonna start very soon. Let us know where you're from. I mean, you want to share something, we can network with you, connect with us. I mean, anything that you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. Definitely leave comments, and please, be active in the chat as well.
Exactly.
Ken and Kevin are going to be presenting this afternoon, and as they go through that, if you have questions, you can shoot those up in the chat. As Kevin presents, Ken's going to try to man chat, and when Ken's presenting, Kevin's going to try to man chat. So
exactly,
our goal is for this really to be as interactive as possible, and for everyone who joins to make the most out of this presentation. So it's going to be just a great opportunity to learn some cool stuff from the Flerlage twins. So we're excited about that.
Exactly. Thank you for being here.
Yes. Also, feel free to drop in. I see people are putting in where they're from and stuff. So that's awesome. Keep doing that. We will get a Zoom recording from Tableau. So once that comes out, we'll be sure to share that in our networks. We do have an Orlando Tableau user group. You don't have to be somebody local to Orlando to join that group. So if you want to join up, let us know. We can connect you there on LinkedIn and get you part of that. And you can follow us at Orlando Tug. So if you want to try to just be following us there. We've got some really great things coming up ahead. Actually, next month, Ray Gilver is going to be sharing on his Iron Viz journey. So that's coming up in October. That's October 12th. So just keep in mind, put that in your schedule. And you can search for Orlando Tug on Google, and you'll find our Tug page where we advertise the things that we have planned for the future. So you can see all of that. So with that, it's 12 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here, get on to the main event to give Ken and Kevin as much time as possible. So with that, I'll go ahead and, I think Kevin's going to start first. And, Kevin and Ken Flerlage, we just thank you guys for taking time out to share your passion for Tableau. And not only that, but your passion for helping others learn and do cool things in Tableau. It's amazing that this is the one tool that almost feels limitless when you're working in it as to what possibilities it has. And while that is great in one respect, you always feel like there's something that you don't know, or you don't know what you don't know. And then somebody comes along and shares some tidbit, and it just revolutionizes how you do things. So we really appreciate you guys joining us today. And I'll go ahead and let Kevin kick off his presentation here. And again, feel free to chat, keep the session as interactive as possible. I see we're up to 72 people and growing, so we're expecting a fairly large audience. And then again, like I said, after the meeting today, we will be posting the YouTube video so you guys can come back to this again. Okay. Kevin, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Let me share my screen, make sure you can see it. Can you see my slides okay?
Yeah, looks good.
And just warn everybody, we are using the Tableau Conference slide deck. And the reason is the first time we did this presentation was at TC22. We actually did it twice, and it wasn't recorded. This one will be, luckily. This is actually the first time we've done it since TC22. So if you weren't there in person, other than a couple thousand people that were there in person, nobody else has seen it. So hopefully that's exciting. My name's Kevin Flerlage. This is Ken Flerlage over here. He's my identical twin. And we run the website flerlagetwins.com together. We are both what is known as Tableau visionaries. It used to be called Tableau Zen Masters. I'm a 3-time Tableau visionary. Ken's a 5-time Tableau visionary. We're both Tableau ambassadors as well. Ken's a formed ambassador and I'm a Tableau Public ambassador. I know you're not a live audience, but at Tableau Conference, it was the first time we had presented to a live audience since the previous live TC, which was TC 19. So it was, I think it was something like 2.5 years before we had presented in front of a live audience. So we were super excited about this. This is actually a selfie from TC 19, and we took one from TC 22 as well. I'll just have to share that sometime. If you were at our TC 19 presentation, or if you watch it on YouTube, it is on YouTube, you may recall Ken talking about us being twins and the fact that we're not competitive. He said we are not competitive. And when he said that, I showed this to everybody. This is looking at favorites. So in 2019, Ken was the second most favorited author on Tableau Public, and I was catching him. He had started using Tableau a couple years before me, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. They didn't have favorites on Tableau Public the whole time, but he was beating me, and I was trying to catch him. He had about 2,500, and I had 1,700. A lot has changed since 2019. I think we all know about this. And then, like so many of us, this kind of led to this. Luckily, we got rid of that. But more importantly, a lot of the data has changed. In fact, I kind of flipped the script on Ken. So, you know, those 2,400 favorites, now we're around 10,000. I'm actually the second most favorited author on Tableau Public, and Ken is a distant third. So if anybody ever wants to know which is the best, I think it's pretty obvious.
I don't know about that, Kev. I think we all know who is really the best at this stuff.
Yes. Andy Kriebel. All right. Truth is, Andy Kriebel is number one. If we look at data about favorites on Tableau Public, we zoom in here. Andy Kriebel is kicking the snot out of both of us with 16,000 versus my measly 10. And if you weren't aware, Andy has the most favorited viz on Tableau Public ever. There's something like, I don't know, 5 million visualizations. That might be more than that. And he has the most favorited ever. This is a little bit old. I think he's probably well over 4,000 favorites and over 3 million views. So pretty mind-boggling there. So agreed. You put me in my place. Andy Kriebel is the best. All right, today we're going to talk about how to do cool stuff in Tableau. This is a really generic title, but we're going to be talking about some tips and some tricks, some different techniques. Ken's going to do 2 sections. I'm going to do 2 sections on some different stuff. There is really no reason to take notes. We are going to move fast, but there's no reason to take notes because this is being recorded. And we have a link here. This link will link out to a bunch of different blog posts, some of ours and some from the community that talk about the different techniques that we're using. So we'll show this again later, and again, it'll be recorded. Do you want to just do a shout out to our awesome community? There's, you know, a lot of the tips and tricks you'll see are from us, but you're also going to see a lot of stuff that we borrowed or stole or whatever you want to call it from other people. And we just want to give them a shout out. There's many more than on this list, but these are the main ones we know for sure we're referencing. So thank you to all the awesome people in this Tableau community. I think that's it, Ken. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you have at it.
All right.
You, Ken.
Am I?
You
Can you hear
aren't.
me?
I'm sorry. We can hear
Okay.
you just fine.
All right. I must have just
Yeah,
turned off
that's-
right as you were saying that. See my screen okay?
Sure can.
All right. So I'm going to start us off with some cool stuff we can do with histograms. So I want to set a target of what we want to build here. I'll share this target, and we want to work towards this, and we'll learn some cool little things along the way. So what we're going to build is a histogram like this. The keys to this is each of these are binned by total customer sales. So we look at each customer, their total sales, then we bin those and create this histogram. So each of these, bars is the count of total customers by their sales, by their total sales. This little dotted line is a reference on the median customer sales. And then we've got some coloring based on that median. So if it's below the median, it'll be red. If it's at the median, it'll be gray, and everything above will be blue. So I think this is a really nice looking histogram, and we're going to try to build it in Tableau. So if you kind of think through how you would build a histogram, how you typically build a histogram, we can kind of work through the steps of how we would do that. So what we do typically do, you'd probably start by creating a bins field on sales. So I've already done that here. If we look at this bins, I'm using a parameter for the bin size. Always recommend using a parameter because you can sort of tinker with it and adjust it, or you can even present it to your users and allow them to fiddle with the bin size, and gives them a little bit more flexibility in what they're looking at. So we have this bins, we'll drag this over to the column shelf, and then I'm going to right click and drag customer name and choose the count distinct option. So we have a histogram, but it's pretty clear that this is not the same. We'll just look at the distribution. It's clear that this is not the same histogram that we were looking for. So what's going on here? Well, when we use that normal bins, it's actually binning that and then looking at each individual record in our data, right? And that's not what we want. What we want is to look at each customer, total their sales, bin that, and then create that histogram. So how might we adjust this bins to work like that? Well, we might start by creating a calculated field of sum of sales and then create the bins on that, right? So I've got this calculated field, sum of sales. I'm going to right click and go to create bins, and you'll see that there's no create bins option. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is that you can't create bins on an aggregate field. This is an aggregate. Since we're doing the sum, we can't create bins on it. So this is where I like to use one of my favorite level of detail calculation techniques. So what's nice about fixed level of detail calculations is that they return a non-aggregate. So what we can do is fix on the customer ID, get the sum of sales for each one, and then this total calculated field is going to create a non-aggregate field. And because it's non-aggregate, we can create the bins on it as we've got here. So it's a nice little way to sort of get around that issue. And quite honestly, I use it all the time to get around that sort of aggregate, non-aggregate issue. So I've already created the bins on that calculated field here, again, using the bin size parameter. So let's drag that over on top of here. This little guy is in my way. Let's try that again. And now we see that a distribution that looks much more like what we were hoping to get. So the next thing I want to do is deal with that reference line. So again, the reference line was at the median bin. So I've created a median sales calculated field here. I'm just fixing on the whole data set and grabbing the median of that LOD that we did before. We drag this over to detail, and then we'll right click on the axis to get our reference line, right? So right click and no reference line option. It's just gone. So this is one of the limitations with the built-in bin functionality of Tableau, is that you can't create reference lines on those bins. So what do? We're kind of stuck. This is something I like to do a lot is add those reference lines on bins. So I hate that I'm sort of limited like this. So instead of using the built-in bins, what we're going to do is introduce this calculated field. So this was developed by Joe Mako, and I learned about it on Jonathan Drummy's website. You can see the link right there. And again, that's on the blog that we shared earlier. So it's just a calculated field. You plug in your measure, your bin size, and it just spits out a value that works and acts really just like a bins field. So it's just a numeric field. I'm going to drag this over on top, and our mark type is set to automatic. Let's set that to bar. And now we still see that right distribution, but we're using this calculated field instead. Now, one thing you notice is the sizing of these bars is a little weird. We're going to come back to that in just a moment, but let's see if we can add our median line first. So right click on the axis, and there's our add reference line option. We can select the median. Let's turn off all this stuff, make it a dotted line, and now we have that nice dotted line for our reference, for our median line. All right, so now let's deal with the width of these bars. I like my histograms to be, right next to each other. I feel like it's easier to read and easier to sort of see that distribution. But as soon as we switched away from using standard bins, it sizes them weird. So we can try to sort of adjust the size a bit. Even at the biggest size, they don't fit together. And then, unfortunately, if you resize this window, then you start getting these things overlapping with each other. And that doesn't work out so well. So the trick for getting these to size properly is to click the size card, change it to fixed, and then we'll drag that bin size parameter onto the size card, and then we'll get these things nicely fitting with each other. And again, if you resize the screen, it automatically fits to the size of that bin. All right, so we're starting to get close. I think one of the last things we want to do is add those colors, right? So remember, we want to have the colors based on whether it's below, at, or above the median. So I've created a calculated field that basically just does some comparisons of the bin to the median, and either the returns median, lower, or higher. It's just going to drag this onto color. And now you can see we get some color. I don't like the default color palettes in this particular scenario. So I'm going to click color, do edit colors. And you'll notice as I'm scrolling down here that I have tons of color palettes that are not sort of built into Tableau. And where I've gotten these from is the DataFam Colors projects. This is a project I worked on with Rodrigo Coloni. Basically, we created a crowdsourcing color palette. You can add your color palettes to it, and then you can go to the tool and download all the palettes. Basically just gives you a preference file that you can pop in your repository, and then you get access to all these palettes. I think we have over 150 different palettes on there. And if you're as anal with color as I am, you'll typically, this is a pretty useful tool, and you'll typically find something you like. So for this chart, I really like this exotic and high impact that was submitted by Neil Richards. For higher, I'm going to do blue, lower we'll do the red, and the median we'll do this sort of neutral gray color. And now we have that nice sort of color, just like the examples that we shared before. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit, clean up the axes, the formatting a bit, and now and the tooltips a bit. And now we have, this chart. If we hover over, we can see a tooltip that gives us the total count of the customers as well as the bin. Now, what I don't love about this is the way it displays that bin. For example, I hover over this, I see a bin of 0. I want to know, and I think particularly, for end users, it's really nice to be able to show the range of those bins, right? So instead of 0, I'd like to show 0 to 499. Instead of 500, I want to show 500 to 999, right? So there are a couple different ways we can do this. One is just to create a string field. So here's a calculated field that basically just turns that into a string, gets the low end of the value and the upper end. We can drag this onto our tooltip, and now we get that nice range. I think that's so much easier for your end users to see that range than just showing the lowest value of the bin. One thing I don't love about this is those numbers don't have those. I like the 1,000 separators, especially as these numbers get bigger. So I'd like to add 1,000 separators. The easiest way to do this would probably be to create 2 calculated fields, one for the low end, one for the high end, drop them on the tooltip, format them, and then update them in the tooltip. But I like to take this opportunity to show this clever little regex trick. So this regex replace trick with these parameters will basically insert comma separators into a number. And that can be useful in a variety of other situations. So with this, we'll drag that down onto the tooltip. And now you'll see we get these comma separators. The final thing I like to do is sometimes add some color to the tooltip to match the bar chart. Not really all that necessary, but adds a nice little effect for it. That's a little bit time consuming. I don't have time to show it today, but a cheap plug for our 2021 Tableau Conference presentation. It was called Make It Better. If you go check that out, we show exactly how to do this in that presentation, and you should be able to search for it and find it on video pretty quickly. And in the end, we have this beautiful, very functional, I think easy to understand histogram, which is bin by total sales per customer. All right, so I'm going to switch gears here. I'm going to talk about a different topic, set control. So we're going to show some cool stuff with set control. So if we were in person, I would ask how many people have used set control, how many people use it regularly, how many people use sets. Usually I find that, it's a relatively small number of people that are really actively using sets and set control. I personally think it's one of the more underutilized features of Tableau. So, Philippos Limperopoulos, who is a former director of product management at Tableau software, he described them in a blog that he wrote. He described sets as named filters that can be used in calculations. And boy, that sounds a little bit weird and it's a little hard to understand. But I think what we're going to show you here in a moment will help to shed some light on what that means. But sets themselves are not new. They've been around for a long time, but they've always been somewhat static. You, as an author of a dashboard, had to sort of create those, and you couldn't really create interactivity with your users, so that it was hard for them to add or remove items from the set. That changed a little bit when set actions came about. That allowed us to add some UI type components and buttons and things like that could add values or remove them from the sets, but that was still a little bit clunky, and it required you to build these UI components, and it just didn't work all that well. Set control really kind of brings everything together, because set control allows you to use a filter-like dialog box. It looks and acts just like a filter, but when you're clicking and checking the boxes, it's actually adding or removing items from the set. So we're presenting something that looks like a filter, which is a UI component that your users are already used to, and so it's very easily for them to learn how to interact with it. So what I want to do is show you some of the most basic use cases for sets and set control, for doing some basic filtering, and then I'll show you some more specific use cases of how to use those in more complex ways. So the basics of sets and set control, well, we can start by just using them as a simple filter. So here we have a chart showing monthly sales, category sales, monthly category sales. I have a filter on category, so I can specify and just look at certain categories if I wish, right? But I can do the same sort of thing with a filter. So what I'm going to do is start off with this chart with no filter. I've created a set on my category. See the set here, and I've selected just furniture and technology to include in that. Now I'm going to right click and drag this over to filters. We'll choose the in out option. Basically, is it in the set? Is it checked? Is it out? Is it outside of the set? And we'll choose to just show those that are in the set. And you can see we clearly get just furniture and technology. And if I right click on this and choose show set, then we're going to see the set control. So this looks just like a filter. It works just like a filter. I can click things, add things, and it's automatically updating the makeup of that set. So if I choose different items, it's filtering just to those items that are in that set at this given time. Now, this is kind of unnecessary since you can use filters, but I just want to demonstrate the basics of how we can use sets in this way. We can also use sets to filter in a slightly different way using a calculated field. So remember, Filippo said sets are named filters that can be used in calculated fields. Well, let's use one in a calculated field. So what I've done is I've created this set calculated field that just says if set, then keep else hide. So the set is going to return true or false value based on whether or not that category, in this case, the category is in the set. So basically, if it's in the set, keep it, otherwise hide it. All this if statement stuff is a little unnecessary. We could just have this calculated field that is just this value and it returns true or false. I like to write out the if statement. I think it's easier for people to understand the logic of it when you do it like that. And, you know, I like to be able to hand workbooks off to people and not have to explain it to them. So, you know, writing that out, I think is a little bit easier. So I'm going to drag this to the filters, and we're going to choose just to show the keep values. Once again, we're only seeing furniture and technology, but we want to get that set control on here so we can interact with it. I can't right click this filter, that won't show me the set option. So we're going to drag the set onto our detail card and then right click it and show the set. And now we've got access to add and remove items from the set. All right, so that's the very basics of how set control works. I'm going to show you two a little bit more advanced use cases for set control and show you a couple of cool little techniques along the way. So one thing I think is particularly useful is doing sort of what I would call an in-out analysis, where you're selecting products, you know, so say products or something that, and putting them in a set and comparing to everything that is outside of the set, right? So we have three categories in our Superstore data: furniture, technology, and office supplies. In this case, I've chosen to show furniture and technology. Those are in the set, and then compare it to office supplies that are out of the set, right? Just a quick plug for Steve Wexler has a great blog on his website on doing this with survey data and comparing different populations of people against each other based on the survey data. So how can we build this? Well, we'll start off with just a chart showing monthly sales. We can take our category set. We're going to right click and drag this onto color, choose the in out option. And now those values that are in the set are red. Those values that are out are blue. We want to add the set control so our users can interact with it. So we'll right click that pill, choose show set. And now we can select which items are in the set and which ones are out. Now, this is okay. I think this is kind of difficult to work with, though, because you know red is in and blue is out, but then you have to refer to the set control to know which one's values are actually in there and not. So what I like to do is actually add a little title to the top that shows you which values are in and which values are out. But there's a really key problem to what I've done here is I've just used a static title here and colored them. So this doesn't update as I change the makeup of the set, as you can see here. So what would be really nice is if I could create a dynamic title that automatically does this. So I'll switch gears and I'll show you a cool little technique for doing this. So this is another one from Jonathan Drummey. Basically allows us to create these comma separated lists. I can't go through it in too much detail, but if you check out the blog, there's a link to it. But I basically separated my in and out values into two separated calculated fields. And then I use this very cool calculated field that Jonathan came up with. It's using previous values and lookups and all these kinds of things. And in the end, we sort of combine them together using previous values and lookup, and essentially are able to create these comma separated lists. So I've one for those categories that are in my set, and those that are out. It's only one, so there's no commas in here. But if there were multiple, we get those commas separated. Now, if we drag these in and out lists over to our text card, and then we can edit that text card and just add a little bit of color. So add the red for the in list, add the blue for the out list, and then we need to, well, yeah, sorry, I'm starting to jump ahead of things, but, and then we have this nice, sort of formatted title. And then finally, what we want to do is just sort of isolate one of these so that we can use it as a title. So this is a little tricky because we're dealing with all these table calculations and things like that. So a nice little trick for this is to use this last function. So last just basically counts the number of rows from the last one in the partition. So this last row here is going to be last equals 0. So we're just saying last equals 0. This is going to return a true or a false value. I'll drag this up to filters, choose true. It will filter down to just that last row. We'll right click these headers and hide the headers for all of these. And now we've isolated just that text. We can drag it up to our sheet and use it as our title. And now as I select different makeups of set, you can see it automatically adjusts that title. So we get this really nice, dynamic, easy to read and easy to understand chart. All right, so one more use case is hex maps. So I love hex maps. I think they're a great way to show certain types of data. Here we have a hex map showing profits by state. And, so deep red are negative profits, the dark blue are high positive profits. But this is showing all my data right now. It might be nice to be able to filter down to specific years and see what happened in different years. So notice what happens if I go down just to 2019. A bunch of our states disappear. So there's North Dakota is gone, West Virginia and DC that sort of floats over here on this hex map is gone, and you kind of forget that it's even there, right? Because it's off sort of in the ocean there. So I think this is really problematic. Because I would rather see those shapes on there, but just with some indicator that they're zero, maybe even like this neutral gray, which is sort of in the middle of the profits. So we can actually use sets to do this, right? So I'm going to start by removing this filter. We're just going to be showing everything to start. I'm going to create a calculated field that just gives me the year of the order date. We'll just have that year, and then I'll create a set on that year. And let's choose all of the years for now to be in that set. Okay, now I'm gonna drag this set up to filters, and I'm going to choose in and out, and I'm going to choose use all, which is really just going to keep everything. It's not going to actually filter anything in the set at all. But I want to use this to get access to the set control so that I can have my users interact with that set. So we're not going to filter anything, but I can right click on this and show set, and changing the value of the set right now isn't doing anything because I haven't told it to do anything with it yet. So what we're going to do with this is create a new measure, profit for selected. Basically say if the year is in that set, give us a profit, otherwise give us 0, right? So we're not going to filter out those ones that have 0 sales. We're just going to hand it a 0 value. Now I'm going to drag this over on top of my color pill instead of the existing profit. So let me pause for a moment. How many of you, I know you can't answer this question, so it's sort of rhetorical, but how many times have you drug a new measure over to your color card and you get, a totally different color palette than what you've chosen? And then you have to go and manually change it again. Well, there's a trick for avoiding that. I learned this from Lorna Brown. If you just double click on that pill and just edit this end line and change it to that new measure, it will maintain all of the settings that you had there before. The color, the fonts, all those things will stay the same, and it will still change that measure. So neat little trick for avoiding having to redo all that work. Okay, so now this is showing that new measure. If we change just down to 2019, you'll see we don't lose these hexes. We just get a 0 value for them, right? So there's North Dakota, there's Vermont, West Virginia was missing. So it's a little bit easier way to work with that data without these big gaps in the data. And I think that's one key use case for set control, is to fill in those gaps, sort of sometimes where we do scaffolding in the past, we can use set control to sort of fill in those gaps. Now, one final thing I don't love about this is, I kind of feel like there's a difference between 0 profit. We could have a customer that had a bunch of negative profits and a bunch of positive profits and end up sort of at 0. I feel like that's a little bit different than these states that had really no sales at all, right? So it'd be nice to have some sort of visual indicator of those states that had nothing, no sales. So to deal with that, what we can do is grab this set, let's drag it to shape. You see on the shapes, we have the filled hexagon for each of these. And for the out one, I'm just going to choose a slightly different hexagon shape, this little hash version. And now we can clearly see that DC, Vermont, West Virginia, Wyoming, and North Dakota all had no sales at all. We're still keeping them on the chart, but we're giving this visual indicator that, they had no sales, and maybe there's a problem we need to go deal with. And that, I think we're done with my section of this. again, these are just a few handfuls of use cases for set control, but hopefully your mind is turning and you're starting to see how you could leverage this in your own job. There's so many different ways you can leverage set control to do things that you can't do with normal filters or parameters or a number of other different features in Tableau. So with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Kevin.
All right, thank you, Ken. That was a very nice hex map. I guess I should say that was really cool stuff since that's the title of the presentation. All right, let's get into some heavy stuff. We're going to talk about table calculations. Cool stuff with table calculations. I assume everybody can see my screen okay? Ken?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so I know that we can't see everybody on screen, but I want to ask how many people are really comfortable using fixed LODs. When we did this at the conference, I'd say, probably 60% of people raise their hand. And then I asked the next question, how many people are really comfortable using table calculations? And I'd say maybe 10% of the group raise their hand. So significantly more people that are very familiar with fixed LODs as compared to table calcs. The nice thing about Tableau is I got this quote that's from me. If you can build it with a fixed LOD, you can absolutely build it with a table calc. That might not always be true, but it's usually true. And there are sometimes there's significant advantages of a table calc over a fixed LOD, and vice versa, of course. They appear different places in the order of operations. A table calc can often replace numerous fixed LODs. You're trying to fix at a certain levels. Sure, you can use an includes and excludes, but I find that most people are really confused by includes and excludes, and I'm probably one of those. So, we're not going to dig too much into all the advantages, but we are going to kind of talk about that last one, the fact that we can really use one table calc to replace lots of different fixed LODs. And what I'm essentially going to do is show if you can write a fixed LOD to make a calculation, we can transform that into a table calc fairly easily. So our use case today is 3 different iPhone products. And as you can see, the last sales of these were in 2020. They were, I guess, discontinued. And so what we really want to do using a calculation is figure out what was the last month that we sold each of these iPhones. So this one we see last sales were in September, this one November, and this one in October. Oh, actually 2019. So if we were going to do that with a fixed LOD, we might write something like this: fixed on product name. Remember, this is our level of detail here is product name, and we're looking at sales by month. So fixed on product name, give me the max order date. I got a date chunk of the month, whatever. Basically, I'm saying fixed on product name, give me the maximum month, right? What if we wanted to do a table calc? Well, we might write another calculation that says window max of, and I got an ATTR here, but of the month essentially. So basically the window max of the month. Now we can see some really strong similarities in the two of these calculations. We see this date trunk of month order date trunk of month order date. They're exactly the same in both calculations. Basically, give me the month, right? And we see a max in the fixed LOD. It's just a max. In the table calc, it's a window max. We do need to aggregate within a table calc, but you can usually slap a min or something like that, or ATTR on there to handle that. But for the fixed LOD, we clearly state it's fixed on product name, but we don't have that anywhere in our table calculation. So how are we controlling that aspect in a table calculation? Well, it's in the table calculation window. So if we were to write a fixed LOD, and we said fixed on product name, giving the max date, whatever we're fixing on will be unchecked in this window. So fixed on product name is unchecked. And then we can look at this table calculation window. We can read it like a fixed LOD. Andy Kriebel has done something similar. We can say essentially, and it's used in the table calc, but we can essentially say fixed on whatever's unchecked. So fixed on product name, give me the max of the month, right? All right, so let's kind of put that into practice. Let's start with the fixed LOD. This is the exact one I just showed, right here. So fixed on the product name, each one of these is a product, give me the max essentially of the order date. I already have that sitting here. I'm going to drag it over to label, and we see September 2020, that matches, November 2020, that matches, October 2019, that matches, right? So we now have for each of the different products, the last month in which those products were sold. Now let's convert that. And I just showed this a minute ago, but we're going to convert that calculation over a table calculation. Again, we're going to use this window max calculation, and we're going to use this table calculation window to determine that it's fixed on this product name, that we're going to do it for every single product name. All right, we'll jump over here. I've created this second calculation. This is just that window max we just looked at, okay? I've got it on detail. What I'm gonna go ahead and do before we put it on the text card is just to edit this table calculation. As a default, it's set to table across. Table across for me is just, it just doesn't compute. I don't really get what it's trying to tell me. I do theoretically understand, but in most cases, I can actually set it to specific dimensions, and I can allow it to do specifically what I want. In this case, we said if we want it fixed on product name, like in the fixed LD, we're going to uncheck product name. Whatever we're fixing on, we're going to uncheck in our table calculation. It's already defaulted to that, so we'll just leave it like that. I'm going to drag this over to label, and we now see what we got. We got the same thing we had before, where it's showing the last month, September 2020, November 2020, October 2019. All right. So what if we wanted, I think I skipped something. Oh, no, I didn't. So what if we wanted to calculate the overall last month? Let's ignore, we do have product name on detail here, but let's ignore the product name. And let's say, I want to know the last month that any of these were sold, right? And we can see very clearly in our chart, it's November 2020. This Apple iPhone 5S was sold in November 2020. This one in September, this October. We know that this is the last day just by looking at it, but we need a calculation to tell us that. Well, we can do the same thing, just like I said, and I've said it 4 or 5 times, and I'm doing that purposely, is whatever you're fixing on, you uncheck in your table calculation window. Well, in this case, we're not going to fix on product name. We're not going to fix on anything. It's just going to say fixed because we want the overall last date. So if we're fixed on nothing, we will uncheck nothing. Okay. So if we're fixed on product name, we uncheck product name. If we're fixed on nothing, we uncheck nothing. So let's give that a try. I have the same window max calculation, the same table calc. And if we edit it, it should look just like we looked at before. So again, if we're going to fix it on nothing, we're going to uncheck nothing. That means product name should be checked. If I hit OK, we now show November 2020, this date for every single one of these, right? So this is essentially fixed on nothing, the other one being fixed on product name. So let's give it a different use case here. This is looking at Superstore data. We're looking at some sales for 5-week period. Each of these represents a order ID within a category, right? So this one is that particular order ID within technology. So, and then it's showing the sales. So week 49, here are all the order IDs / categories. And the vertical, the y-axis is showing sales. And I just jittered them left to right just to kind of give them some spacing. So the goal here is let's get the max sales value for one of these marks. We can see again really clearly it's this one. It's 2880. It's the highest one on this y-axis, right? So we know the max value is 2880. So let's write a calculation to calculate that. Just like before, I'm going to use window max, and I'm going to this is sum of sales on my view. So I'm just going to take the window max of the sum of sales. So theoretically, if I drop this on label, we should get what we want. And we can see we got 2880 on our label, 2880 here, come down here and wait a minute. This one's not 2880, it's 2480. And this one's 1890, and this is 1705. They're all different. They're not, it's not giving me the overall max. So why is it doing that? Well, let's take a look at the calculation. So I just edited that calculation again, table across. I don't really know what it's doing. So I'm going to set it to specific dimensions, and then we can really start to see what's going on. Again, whatever we're fixing on is unchecked in the table calculation window. So we could read this if we wanted to read it like a fixed LOD. It is table calc, but if we wanted to read it like a fixed LOD, we'd say fixed on order ID and category, then give me the max sum of sales. So fixed on order ID and category. If we look at this, order ID and category is really the level of detail we're looking at. So essentially all this is doing is giving me the sum of sales for every mark. You see on my tooltip, that sum of sales 2880, and the label says 2880, 2480, 2480, 1890, 1890. So we can fix this. We want the overall. We want it fixed on nothing. We want the overall grand total. So we fix on nothing. We uncheck nothing. So that means we check everything. And now we see that 2880 value being replicated throughout. No matter what the sum of sales is, 2880 is replicated throughout on all these marks. Now, what if we wanted to do it for the category? So the category is on color. So this pink or this orange is technology. The pink is office supplies. The blue is furniture. What if we wanted the max value for every single category? Well, we've used this same technique over and over. Fixed on the category, give me something. So fixed on category, whatever we're fixing on is going to be unchecked. So we uncheck this. We see 2880 for all of the oranges. We see 1890 for all the pink ones and 1670 for all the blue ones. This was totally game changing for me when I discovered this, that table calculations can be really thought of in the same way as fixed LODs and really easy to convert them over. Sometimes table calculations are just better than fixed LODs. Sometimes fixed LODs are just better. And honestly, you know, one of the major challenges with fixed LODs is having to use that context filter. And that causes other problems in here. So sometimes if you can move this thing down lower in the order of operations, you'll save yourself a whole lot of headaches. And if you had it built with a fixed LOD in the first place, you can easily move it over to a table calc. All right, we're going to do some lighter stuff. And this is going to focus on cool things that are invisible. That sounds a little bit weird, maybe, but I'll kind of walk through what I'm talking about. If you've listened to any presentation, probably any presentation I've done in the last 3 years, you've probably heard me talk about transparent shapes. I use transparent shapes and images all the time. It is the most flexible little tool that I use, and it just isn't necessarily intuitive. So I'll kind of show you what this looks like. So first off, what is a transparent shape? What is a transparent image? If we were to open PowerPoint, I'm not going to do that, but if we were to open PowerPoint and draw a square out, and then I would change that square to have no fill, not white fill, but no fill. And then I were to change that square to have no outline, the shape disappears, right? It's gone. Well, it's not gone. It's actually still there. It's just fully transparent. You can actually still select that little square, right click and save it as a picture. And if you save that as a picture, you now have a transparent image, a transparent shape. So how can we use that in Tableau? Well, you've got to our website, you'll see lots of different use cases. Just search for transparent shapes. I've got dozens of them. I tell you, if I rewrote that blog post, I probably have 50 different use cases because I use them constantly. They're so flexible. They save you lots of pain. I'll show a couple really quick examples. This is a chart we build really often at work, and we don't want it to look like this. We want to focus on one thing. We want to focus on, this is percentage of accounts, percent of profits. We have these models that allow us to improve these. So we maybe just want to focus on 30%. At 30%, we can give you 47% of our profit, right? Versus at, you know, a random 30% of our profit, right? So this is the chart I want to create from this. Well, we might do that with a calculation. I might have to create a calculation that says if the percentage of accounts equals 0.3, then give me the sum of percent of profit, else null. And then I would take that and I'd use that on my dual axis. Forget a calculation, forget doing a different pill on your dual axis. All you need to do, all you need to do is go over here to the circle mark, the ones that show in the circle. We're going to change this to a shape. I'm going to put the percentage of accounts on shape. Nothing's changed yet. They're all applied with a circle. I'm going to take this, all but the 0.3, and I'm going to pick a transparent shape. There are 6 transparent shapes here. You can't see any of them. Doesn't really matter which one I pick. I'm going to apply that, and then all of a sudden, that thing's gone, right? So without writing a calculation, without changing anything on my dual axis, I have this 0.3 mark set. And we could do that with a parameter. We could make it dynamic if we wanted to, but really easy way to create this without even a calculation. You could do the same thing. This is exactly a technique I use if I want to just mark the last point on a chart. So this is max month. I'm not even going to show you the calculation, but I'm going to change it to a shape. It's basically a true false. Tell me if it's the max month or not. You get a true and a false, and I'm going to change the falses to transparent. And we have this really nice chart where I've marked the most recent month, and I've used a calculation. So it's going to be dynamic with as we move. So lots of different other cool things you can do with it. My most favorite is using big numbers or KPIs. You typically just use the text mark, and then your users are in there interacting, and they click on it and they go, oh my gosh, what is this blue? I just broke it. What happened? You know, and then they click again and they can't get rid of it. And it's like, it is really confusing to users, this big blue square that really means nothing. So we can get rid of that really easily. We can change this to a shape, change this as you would expect to a transparent shape. And now as I click through, we have this really sort of what seems to be more of an intentional user experience versus that big blue square, right? And every time I create a big number, a band, I use this transparent shape. I never use the text mark ever. It's just a lot better user experience. All right, let's jump back to this example. I've color coded this true, false, but still showing just circle marks. What would be really cool is if I could take this color and say, like, I want to control the transparency on just the red marks, right? So like, I want to make the red marks disappear, but I want the blue mark to stay there. But it's really all or nothing. You know, whatever marks I'm controlling, that have some sort of color, they're going to be controlled by this opacity. So there's no way to say, just make the red marks transparent and the blue mark not transparent. Well, that's not 100% true. If you've ever created color palettes, Ken's blog post that I linked to before, we'll talk a little bit about color palettes. But you can create these color palettes using hex color codes. So 6 alphanumeric digits that represent a single color, right? And you can create these palettes in your preferences.tps file. Well, if you were to add a 00 to any of these hex colors, guess what it does? It makes it transparent, makes it completely transparent. So what you can do is you can create this this transparent color palette in your TPS file. You can't do it from a color picker or anything like that. But if you have it in your color palettes, then you can actually pick it using a color palette. So let's try that. I'm going to make these false values instead of red. I'm going to make them transparent. It says by Ken Flerlage, but it's really about from me. He's stealing my color. So it looks like it's black, but it's actually transparent. If I apply that, you can see it kind of disappears. Hit OK. And we now have made these marks, though they're still there, but they're completely transparent, where this color is still showing. So we don't need that opacity color. We just make the thing transparent color. I think that's pretty slick. And recently I found some really cool use cases when you start to overlap maps, especially maps on top of each other. A hex map, for example, recently needed to have a hex map with 2 different color palettes, one discrete, one as a range, one is continuous. That's really difficult to do in one layer, but if you layer 2 maps on top of each other with a dual axis or with map layers, you can use this transparent color to let color in the back shine through. I'm not going to get too much into detail, but it has a lot of cool use cases for maps. Here's one. This is really me just fooling around. I wanted to look at and this is not the full viz, but this is just part of it. I wanted to look at all the places my family has gone and spent at least one evening. Now, the reds means we haven't been there. And this is as a family. I've been to a lot more places than this, but just for these states, we as a family have visited all these states and stayed at least one night. Only 20%, pretty sad. We need to get out west. But I thought this was kind of nice, but I really wanted to give it some flair. So what I did was this. I'm just going to go to the sheet and I'm going to change the red color to be white. I'm going to change this yes to be this transparent color. Okay, that Ken's claiming. And then I'm going to just change the opacity, 80%, something like that. And then I'm going to go back to the dashboard. I'll show you what I did. I actually cropped a picture of my family behind this map. And now you can easily see the state showing through using that transparent color. where we've been, and then the other ones with a slightly transparent white on top of it. So just a fun little trick that you can use. And again, I talked about map layering. This is a goofy little example, but there's lots of other things that work really well with maps. And here's a thing that I created using parameter actions when parameter actions came back in 2019, early 2019. It's just a little sliding chart that uses a parameter action to recognize where I'm at. And before I just used it with two colors. You can actually see up top, there's two different colors, but the ones that are showing are blue and the ones to the right of it are actually transparent. So it just shows the background through. So some cool little use cases for transparent colors. Again, another blog post on our website. You search for transparent colors and you'll find several different use cases for that. I also like to use images. We talked about shapes, we talked about colors, but I like to use images for quite a few things as well. So one example is if you're typing text and you type a URL, it will turn into a hyperlink automatically, right? You can see this right here. So right here, that turns into your URL. But if I'm talking about Tableau software, I don't really want to type out the entire URL, but if I edit this text, there's no way to like right click and add a hyperlink like you would in Word or most softwares. So what we can do is we can fake it, okay? And how we're gonna fake it is I'm gonna make this look like a hyperlink. I'm just gonna make it underlined in blue. Looks kind of like a hyperlink, still does absolutely nothing. I'm gonna change this to floating and I'm gonna drag out an image here. I'm going to center it and I'm going to go choose one of these transparent images. Doesn't matter which one. Then I'm going to paste the hyperlink that I just included up here and hit OK. And I'll make this a little bit smaller. And then if I put this into full view, what you'll see is I've got this transparent shape on top of it with a hyperlink. And you don't see it's there because it's transparent, but it's now created this hyperlink within Tableau, right? So kind of a cool little trick. I'm trying to hit escape and it won't come out. There's another little trick. This wasn't originally supposed to be in the presentation, but I did a blog post that was talking about 5 things you can do in web edit that you can't do in Tableau Desktop. And creating hyperlinks is one of them. So I just edited this, hit edit text. I'm going to select this and I have that URL pasted or copied. I'm just going to hit Control V to see what happens. Boom, it creates a hyperlink. Let me show you that again. All I got to do if I have it copied is to select this, hit Control V, and it'll paste it. You can also do this and or you could put the hyperlink in here and then you can edit the hyperlink, etc. But the cool thing is just select it and you can create a hyperlink right there in Tableau web edit. So cool little feature of web edit that you can't do in desktop. Another thing I like to do with transparent images is navigation. So you'll see this kind of new thing that people are doing. It's not really new, but it's gaining more. It's getting more and more common. Is they create these backgrounds in another tool and then they bring it into Tableau as an image. People are using Figma for this a lot. Some people use Illustrator. I just use PowerPoint. I created this in PowerPoint for the most part, and you can see it's just an image. And the goal for this is a silly little game I built on Tableau Public. And the goal was that you could just use these as navigation. Now I could cut these out and bring them in as their own little button, but really I just have this background. All I really want to do is float a little button over top of it. So let's take a navigation button. We're going to drag that out here and cover it. I'm going to edit this. I want it to be an image button. I'm going to choose this transparent shape and we're going to tell it to navigate to, I don't know, PM. That's unimportant. So now we have this transparent shape overlaid this, so we can do it for all the other ones. But if I click this button, that button's on top and it does the navigation just like I would want. The biggest problem with this is when you publish it and you hover over this, it gets this weird gray box. It actually looks like you did something, the users thinks that they did something wrong. So this is a really kind of an odd experience for an end user. And that happens when you're using transparent images as navigation buttons for whatever reason. So we can fix that. Okay, we're going to talk about, instead of transparent images, we're going to now talk about transparent characters. You've probably heard of a blank character. Maybe you haven't. That's okay. There are lots of different Unicode characters that are blank characters. I'll warn you, some of these Unicode characters don't work. I know for a fact that this U2800 does work. So if you want a blank character, you can search for that. I've got it down here. I'm not going to go to the website. I'm just going to copy it right from here. And you can see it's just a blank. It's just a space. It doesn't even look like this. It looks like this. There's just nothing there. But this provides a lot of advantages within Tableau. And most of those advantages can't be solved with just hitting the space bar. They have to have a character. So let's fix this transparent image hovering problem using a blank character. I'm going to hit this button. I'm going to change it to a text button. I'm going to change the background to none. And in the title, I'm just going to paste that blank character. Okay. It looks no different than it did before. It still works the same. I can navigate to that. But when we publish, it looks like this. So you now have this experience versus this experience, just so much more user-friendly, and your users don't think they made a mistake. So cool little technique to use backgrounds and just use navigation buttons as your sort of navigation pane. There's several other use cases for blank characters. Here's one that I run into all the time. I've got this nice chart and I have this kind of cool little mark. And then last step, I add a label, and the label is jammed right on top of the mark and really close to the line. Like, why does that happen? So we might come in here and edit this label. Maybe I'll put some spaces out to the right. I'm just going to add a bunch just to be really obvious and hit OK. And nothing changed. They're in the exact same spot they were before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe for some reason I got to put them out to the left. Nothing. They haven't moved. I added a bunch of spaces. You can see them. Look at all these spaces I add here and here, yet that label didn't move one bit. Going to go to a different sheet where those spaces are no longer there. And let's just paste this Unicode character in here and hit OK. And you see what happens. It spaced that thing out perfectly. Probably a little too much. Let's take one of them off, hit OK. And now we have perfect spacing using that blank character. And the last one I'll talk about today is just a text table. We have, this is using the world indicators data. We have all these different metrics in a table, and I like headers to be centered. I just always like them to be centered. I think they just look a lot better. I could right align these, but they just look sloppy if you ask me. And the problem is I've got all my numbers to be right aligned. They're all numbers and we right align numbers. That's what we should do. It allows us to line up those decimal points, right? But I don't like the way the right aligned numbers line up with the centered headers. So in Excel, I think we all know what we do. We use a little indent and, we'd format and we'd indent it a little bit to the right and we kind of line that up. Well, we can do the exact same thing in Tableau. I might, think that I could just use the space bar like I showed before. Again, I've added 6 spaces there. These things didn't move. But if I come in here and go to the text card and say paste in, I'm going to paste in 3, might be too much. 3 of those Unicode characters. These things shift over and we've got a lot better center alignment, even though they're still right aligned, right? So they're lining up with this. I might have a little bit too much, might have to take one off, but. All right, that is all we've got. I think we came in just over the hour. Again, all this stuff is on flerlagetwins.com/cool stuff. And then again, this is being recorded, so you can access it anytime. And I don't know if people are still around, Jeff, to take questions. Sorry, Andy Kriebel, he's number one. And I just want to say, Andy allowed us to do this. So we just want to thank him for being a good sport. Awesome. He is not being arrogant and trying to tell everybody he's number one, but he's incredible at this stuff, and he was really gracious enough to let us pick on him a little bit. So anyways, happy to take questions if anybody has them.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for presenting today and for sharing your skills with Tableau to our community. I know it's a big help for all of us. These things that you are experiencing, you show it to us, and then now we can go back and, you can pick up those nuggets, and that really, really makes a big difference. And I also got to give a shout out to Andy. I follow him and his YouTube channel. He's got some really great content out there, extremely helpful. So again, we all appreciate you very, very much. I know it is a little after 1. We are recording the sessions, but if there are any questions, I mean, I think we're open to that. If anyone has anything they want to ask,
I have a question, Jeff.
go for it.
I saw some people in the chat added a similar question. I had this question when I was watching the presentation. So I wrote it down. Like we noticed at the beginning, you were showing set controls. And then after that, we were talking about LODs and table calculations. So a set control instead of a filter. My question is it that any difference on performance per se? Like for example, using a regular filter than a set control, will that affect any performance? Is it almost the same? And what about LOD or table calculation? I think that a lot of people were thinking about that too.
Yeah, so I mean, I've never really thought about the performance implications of set control versus filters. I'd have to think about what it's doing at the database and like SQL level to think about what it, how that would impact it. But my gut is that, you're probably not going to see much of an impact. My recommendation would be, if you can use a simple filter, then use a filter. There's no point in doing this stuff with set control, right? Look at it from a functionality standpoint. If you can do it with a filter, do it with a filter. If you're running into problems with the filter, then use the set control, right? I'd say that's the main thing. And I don't think you're going to really notice many issues with performance. When we get into the topic of the performance difference between LODs and table calcs, it was a good conversation here on the chat. But it's just so dependent on so many things. I mean, the main thing to know about that is that level of detail calculations are actually being passed to the database, creating a subquery within the SQL, and the database is doing that work of bringing back that value. Whereas table calculations are being computed in memory by Tableau. There are so many things that might make one, if you've got a super fast database and or it's just really well indexed or something like that, then an LOD might be faster than the table calc. But sometimes that's not the case, right? Sometimes SQL is slow and clunky, and doing it in memory is better. So I generally say, use the method that seems like the right method. If the performance is an issue, then try the other method, right? And find what kind of works best in your specific scenario.
Hey, Ken, a related question to that. I know that filters often have that option where you can show related fields only, and you don't get that option with a parameter. Do you know if the set actions, do they enable that as well, or is that more like the parameter?
Have it enabled for all values in context. That's not it's slightly different. And I think Filippo's, we have a link to where Filippo's kind of talks about that, I think, or do you? But there's no all relevant values, but there are all values in context.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Thanks.
Well, someone's asking if the workbooks are online. They are posted online. If you go to the blog that we shared, I just shared it again in the chat. At the top, you can see Kevin's workbook and my workbook, and they're downloadable, and you can take them apart.
Awesome. Great.
And I believe in your blog, and tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, as you know, everybody gets fascinated. I think when I was at the conference and your meeting, everybody gets fascinated with this transparent tricks, right? Like everything related to transparent. I even seen people here doing like this, and some people like awesome. It is on the blog, correct? There is a specific area, some pages just for the transparent things, right?
I've got 2 years ago, I wrote a blog post about transparent shapes and images, and it kind of talked about the first section. And then I have a separate blog post about transparent color. I haven't really written any about the blank characters. I think some other people might have, but I think, in fact, Lindsay Betzedahl wrote about that trick. It's where I got it from, the trick with the navigation buttons using a transparent blank character instead of a. So I don't have a blog post on blank characters, but if you just go to the website and search for transparent, you're going to find lots of content.
Great. Thank you.
Through what I showed.
It's really cool. I don't know if is there anything else. Jeff, I'm looking here. There's so many comments and great comments everywhere.
Yeah,
We had around almost 150 people attending
Yeah.
at one time,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Wonderful.
pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate
Okay.
it.
No, thank you guys so much for taking
Thank you.
time to share with our community. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for giving out to us, right? Because you guys really help us a lot. So high
Thank you.
fives. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We will share the video link as soon as we get that back. So once we get that out, we'll get that to you guys. And then we'll start to share it in the community as well. So people can have this as a reference if needed.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay,
And
bye now.
thank you.